Sometimes one betrayal can change everything. A king falls, a war begins, or a nation disappears. The greatest empires weren't destroyed by outside invaders, but imploded from within, betrayed by those closest to power. These aren't just stories of broken trust. These are moments when personal betrayal altered the course of civilization itself. And none is more shocking than how a military's supreme commanders, sworn to protect their ruler with their lives, instead forced his abdication, abandoning centuries of sacred oaths and unleashing a revolution that would transform global politics for the next 100 years. From ancient Rome to modern times, these are the political betrayals that didn't just ruin friendships, they ruined history. Number 1. Brutus betrays Julius Caesar. Rome, 44 BCE. The Senate chamber on the Ides of March. Julius Caesar, recently declared dictator perpetuo, dictator for life, enters the theater of Pompey where the Senate is meeting. Despite warnings and omens, he has come without his personal guard. He had no reason to be afraid. Among the senators are men he has pardoned, promoted, and even loved as family. As he takes his seat, a senator named Tullius Cimber approaches with a petition. While Caesar is distracted, daggers appear from beneath togas. The first strike comes, then another, and another. Caesar fights back until he sees a face in the crowd of assassins that stops him cold. Marcus Junius Brutus, his protege and, some whispered, his illegitimate son. Caesar had pardoned Brutus after he fought against him in Rome's civil war, then elevated him to high office. Their relationship was so close that when Caesar first saw Brutus among his attackers, he reportedly uttered in Greek, "You too, my child." The sight of Brutus among the conspirators broke Caesar's will to resist. He pulled his toga over his face and collapsed. The dictator who had conquered Gaul, crossed the Rubicon, and transformed Rome from republic to empire, bled out at the foot of a statue of his old rival Pompey. The conspirators had convinced themselves they were saving the republic from tyranny. Instead, they plunged Rome into another civil war. Caesar's adopted son Octavian, later Emperor Augustus, and General Mark Antony hunted down the assassins. Brutus, defeated at the Battle of Philippi in 42 BCE, fell on his own sword rather than face capture. The betrayal that was meant to restore republican liberty instead ensured its extinction for 1,000 years. Brutus sacrificed personal loyalty for what he believed was the greater good. History suggests he catastrophically miscalculated. His name has become synonymous with betrayal, preserved forever in the ninth circle of Dante's Inferno, where Brutus is eternally devoured in one of Satan's 3 mouths as punishment for his treachery. Number 2. Alcibiades switches sides in the Peloponnesian War. Athens, 415 BCE. The assembly has just voted to launch an ambitious expedition against Syracuse in Sicily. The charismatic and ambitious General Alcibiades had championed the plan, overcoming the objections of the more cautious Nicias. Handsome, eloquent, and aristocratic, Alcibiades was the golden child of Athenian politics. His former mentor, the philosopher Socrates, had saved his life at the Battle of Potidaea. Pericles, Athens' greatest statesman, was his guardian. Every advantage of birth, wealth, and education had been his. As the massive Athenian fleet prepared to sail, scandal erupted. Throughout Athens, religious statues called Hermes were found desecrated. Rumors implicated Alcibiades, and though he demanded an immediate trial to clear his name, his enemies arranged for the expedition to depart with the charges unresolved. While Alcibiades was away leading troops, his political opponents successfully tried him in absentia. The penalty: death. A ship was dispatched to Sicily to return him to Athens for execution. Alcibiades, however, had other plans. He escaped his Athenian escorts and fled not to neutral territory, but to Athens' bitter enemy, Sparta. What followed was perhaps history's most brazen case of switching sides. The man who had been Athens' most aggressive warhawk transformed into its most dangerous enemy. He advised the Spartans on how to defeat Athenian strategies he himself had helped design. On his council, Sparta fortified Decelia, a position that disrupted Athens' access to its silver mines and agriculture. Not content with this betrayal, Alcibiades then convinced the Spartans to ally with Persia against Athens, fundamentally altering the power dynamics of the war. But Alcibiades' loyalties were as fluid as water. After fathering a child with the wife of the Spartan king, an additional personal betrayal, He fled to Persia when Sparta turned against him. Later, in an astonishing turn, he managed to get himself recalled to Athens, where he briefly led its forces again before another fall from grace. Alcibiades' shifting allegiances contributed significantly to Athens' eventual defeat in the Peloponnesian War, a defeat that ended the classical age of Greece and forever altered Western civilization. His betrayals weren't just personal. They helped dismantle the world's first democracy and change the course of Mediterranean history. Eventually, Alcibiades' luck ran out. In 404 BCE, he was assassinated in Phrygia, likely by Persians acting on Spartan requests. His final betrayal had been to betray too many different sides, leaving him with nowhere safe to turn. Before we get into a literal backstabbing by priests, take a moment to like and subscribe to our channel if you're enjoying these tales of history's most devastating betrayals. Thank you to all who do. Number 3. The Pazzi Conspiracy. Backstabbing the Medicis. Florence, April 26, 1478. Easter Sunday Mass at the Cathedral of Santa Maria del Fiore. The Medici brothers, Lorenzo and Giuliano, kneel in prayer, surrounded by thousands of worshippers. The cathedral's magnificent dome, designed by Brunelleschi, soars overhead. The air is thick with incense as the priest raises the host for the most sacred moment of the liturgy, the elevation of the Eucharist. It's at this precise moment, when the entire congregation is focused on the altar, that the attack begins. Francesco de' Pazzi and Bernardo Baroncelli fall upon Giuliano de' Medici. Their daggers pierce him 19 times. "I am dead," he gasps, his blood pooling on the cathedral floor as he collapses. Simultaneously, two priests, yes, priests who have just been celebrating the Easter liturgy, attack Lorenzo. But Lorenzo is only wounded in the neck. He draws his sword, uses his cloak as a shield, and manages to escape across the cathedral to the sacristy, where loyal friends barricade the bronze doors created by Donatello. The conspiracy, orchestrated by the Pazzi family, longtime rivals of the Medici in banking and politics, had been meticulously planned with the support of Pope Sixtus IV and his nephew Girolamo Riario. Even the Archbishop of Pisa, Francesco Salviati, was implicated. The plot called for simultaneous assassinations inside the cathedral and a coup throughout Florence. But with Lorenzo still alive, the plan unraveled rapidly. The people of Florence, rather than rising against the Medici as the conspirators hoped, responded with fury against the Pazzi. What followed was a bloodbath. The Archbishop of Pisa was hanged from the window of the Palazzo della Signoria, still wearing his clerical robes. Francesco de' Pazzi was captured as he tried to flee the city and hanged alongside the Archbishop. Over the next days, hundreds of suspected conspirators and Pazzi associates were killed. Some torn limb from limb by angry mobs, others thrown from windows, many hanged from the palazzo windows. The Pazzi name was literally erased from Florence. Their coat of arms was removed from public buildings, streets, and inscriptions. Rather than destroying the Medici, the Pazzi conspiracy cemented Lorenzo's power. Known afterward as Lorenzo the Magnificent, he would guide Florence through its most glorious period of Renaissance patronage and achievement. The betrayal backfired completely. The Pazzi family was decimated, their property confiscated, their survivors exiled, and their name blackened for centuries. Pope Sixtus IV, who had blessed the conspiracy hoping to increase papal influence in Florence, instead found himself in a war against the Medici that damaged the church's standing. Number 4. The Betrayal of Joan of Arc. Compiègne, France, May 23, 1430. A 19-year-old girl leads a sortie against Burgundian forces besieging the city. She wears armor and carries the banner that has inspired French troops to victory after victory against the English in the 100 Years' War. This is Joan of Arc, who has claimed divine visions instructed her to drive the English from France and ensure the coronation of Charles VII. As Burgundian reinforcements arrive, French troops retreat toward the city. Joan, taking up the rearguard position to ensure her men's safety, finds herself unable to re-enter as the drawbridge is raised prematurely. Some accounts suggest the order to raise the bridge came from the town's governor, Guillaume de Flavy, the first betrayal of many to come. Captured by Burgundian troops, Joan might have expected to be ransomed like other valuable prisoners of war. King Charles VII, whom she had helped crown at Reims less than a year earlier, certainly had the resources to secure her release. Instead, the Burgundians sold her to their English allies for 10,000 livres, The English, who had suffered humiliating defeats at the hands of Joan's inspired French forces, wanted revenge. But Charles VII, the king who owed his crown to this peasant girl's efforts, did nothing. No ransom was offered, no diplomatic pressure applied, and no rescue attempted. The king's silence as Joan faced trial for heresy constitutes perhaps the most shameful betrayal in this story. A man with everything, abandoning the woman who had given him everything. The English, unable to defeat Joan militarily, sought to destroy her through a church trial. Though technically conducted by French clerics led by Bishop Pierre Cauchon, the proceedings were manipulated by English authorities determined to discredit Joan by having her condemned as a heretic. The trial itself was a masterclass in procedural betrayal. Joan was held in a military prison rather than an ecclesiastical one. She was denied counsel. The judges were carefully selected for their pro-English sympathies. When initial proceedings didn't yield the desired results, the charges were adjusted. Most cruelly, Joan was tricked into wearing men's clothing again after agreeing to wear women's clothes, a relapse that sealed her fate. On May 30, 1431, Joan was burned at the stake in Rouen marketplace. Eyewitnesses reported that even English soldiers wept as she died, some claiming they had burned a saint. 25 years later, after the English had been driven from most of France, a rehabilitation trial would clear Joan's name. In 1920, nearly 500 years after her death, she was canonized as a saint by the same church that had condemned her. Number 5. The betrayal of Nicholas II by his own officers. Pskov, Russia, March 15, 1917. Aboard the imperial train, Tsar Nicholas II, emperor and autocrat of all Russia, finds himself surrounded not by loyal courtiers, but by representatives of the Duma, Russia's parliament, and his own generals. They have come with an unprecedented demand: his abdication. Just days earlier, bread riots in Petrograd, formerly St. Petersburg, had escalated into a full-scale revolution. Nicholas had ordered troops to suppress the uprising, but here came the first betrayal. The soldiers refused to fire on their own people. Some even joined the protesters. As the revolution spread, Nicholas attempted to return to the capital from military headquarters at Mogilev. His train was diverted to Pskov, where the real shock awaited him. General Nikolai Russky, commander of the Northern Front, informed the Tsar that he no longer commanded the loyalty of the army. Even more devastating was a telegram from General Mikhail Alexiev, his chief of staff, who had consulted with other front commanders. Their unanimous verdict: the Tsar must abdicate to save Russia from civil war and maintain some hope of continuing the fight against Germany in World War I. This was the ultimate betrayal for Nicholas. The army had been the cornerstone of Tsarist power for centuries. The officer corps, drawn almost exclusively from the nobility, had sworn personal loyalty to the Tsar. They were supposed to be the regime's final line of defense. Instead, they abandoned him at the critical moment. Most shocking was the telegram from his cousin, Grand Duke Nicholas Nikolaevich, former commander-in-chief of the Russian army. I implore you to take the decision demanded by the current situation. As an honest man, I must tell you that this is the only way to save Russia and preserve the dynasty. The military's betrayal left Nicholas isolated. On March 15, 1917, he signed the instrument of abdication, renouncing the throne that his family had held for over 300 years. The officers who betrayed Nicholas likely believed they were saving Russia. Many hoped for a constitutional monarchy under Nicholas's brother Grand Duke Mikhail, who was named successor. But Mikhail refused the throne without the people's explicit consent, effectively ending the Romanov dynasty. The provisional government that replaced the monarchy would itself be overthrown by Lenin's Bolsheviks in November 1917. The generals who had betrayed the Tsar to save Russia from revolution instead opened the door to an even more radical one. Nicholas and his family were initially held under house arrest. After the Bolshevik takeover, they were moved to Yekaterinburg, where on July 17, 1918, they were executed in the basement of the Ipatiev house. Nicholas, his wife Alexandra, their 5 children, and 4 loyal servants who had chosen to remain with them. The military's betrayal of Nicholas II stands as a watershed moment in Russian history. It ended a dynasty that had ruled for 3 centuries and created the power vacuum that allowed the Bolsheviks to seize control, leading to the creation of the Soviet Union and transforming the 20th century's geopolitical landscape. In a final irony, Many of the very officers who had betrayed Nicholas would themselves face persecution under the Soviet regime, betrayed in turn by the revolution they had enabled. Number 7. Bonus mentions: Guy Fawkes and the Gunpowder Plot. In 1605, a group of English Catholics led by Robert Catesby plotted to blow up the House of Lords during the state opening of Parliament, assassinating King James I and much of the Protestant aristocracy. Guy Fawkes was caught red-handed with 36 barrels of gunpowder in the cellar beneath Parliament. The plot was betrayed by Francis Tresham, one of the conspirators, who sent an anonymous letter warning his brother-in-law Lord Monteagle to avoid Parliament that day. The conspirators were tortured, tried, and executed. The plot's failure led to increased persecution of English Catholics and is still commemorated annually on November 5th with bonfires and fireworks. Perhaps America's most notorious traitor, Benedict Arnold, was initially a hero of the Revolutionary War, playing crucial roles in American victories at Fort Ticonderoga and Saratoga. Passed over for promotion and feeling unappreciated, Arnold began secret negotiations with the British in 1779. In 1780, after being given command of the crucial fortress at West Point, Arnold planned to surrender it to the British for £20,000. The plot was exposed when Arnold's British contact, Major John Andre, was captured with incriminating documents. Arnold escaped to British lines, later leading British forces against his former comrades. He died in London in 1801, despised by Americans and mistrusted by the British, a man without a country. The Battle of Plassey in 1757 is often considered the beginning of British rule in India. It's also the site of one of history's most consequential betrayals. Mir Jafar, the commander of the Bengali Nawab Siraj-ud-Dowlah's army, secretly allied with the British East India Company. During the battle, Mir Jafar's forces stood idle rather than engaging the numerically inferior British, leading to the Nawab's defeat. As reward, the British installed Mir Jafar as the new Nawab, a puppet ruler dependent on British support. This betrayal opened the door to British colonization of the Indian subcontinent, affecting the lives of hundreds of millions for the next 2 centuries. In Bengali, Mir Jafar remains a byword for treachery. These betrayals mark moments when alternative futures suddenly close and unexpected new paths open. The world we inhabit today, its borders, governments, and power structures, was shaped in part by these critical moments when trust collapsed and loyalty failed. And perhaps most chillingly, these stories remind us that the most devastating betrayals come from within the circle of trust, where defenses are lowest and vulnerability greatest. As the Roman Stoic philosopher Seneca wrote, "Disaster comes when you trust completely." Which betrayal shocked you the most? Or do you think some of them were justified? Let me know in the comments below. Thank you for watching Nefarious History, and don't forget to subscribe for more stories of blood and betrayal throughout history.